Great. So this is our third webinar. We're presenting on behalf of women in localization, and our mission is based on three key pillars: foster global community, the advancement of women, and our profession of localization. And so this webinar is the series. Basically, we are focusing on our second pillar, which is a way to advance women. And with these, we've created a series of workshops so that we can keep refreshing our skills, our techniques, our concepts, stay sharp, keep advancing, and be successful at work as well as in the home. In the next slide, you'll see our calendar. These are all of the webinars that we had slated for this year. The first and second one we have recorded. So if you've not seen these yet, I highly recommend that you do. They are amazing webinars. We've learned a lot in them. These were presented by Anna. And obviously, Jennifer here is slotted herself in between the personal brand and the localization program manager. If you haven't had a chance to hear these first two, please send me a quick email. We're working on a way to get them in an easier format for you to access. So please be patient with us. The technology team and I are trying to get this set up for the next one, but it's taking a little time. But without further ado, I wanted to present Jennifer. You guys are probably familiar with her. She's the UK chapter manager and a guru at presenting and webinars because she's been teaching for many, many years. And actually, she's doing a PhD. Where she finds the time, I don't know. PhD in localization, quality management, and technology. So without further ado, I will give it away to Jennifer. Enjoy.
Thank you, Pia. Thank you, Pia, for the very, very kind introduction. It's always very nice when somebody refers to us as guru, but then you need to level expectations. So I have to say that although it is true that I have some experience teaching and actually teaching online courses on localization, these are the boring ones. These are the academic ones that are very good for learning new things, but probably we could say that they're not a really good example of a very interesting and very inspiring webinar, which is what we want to do here, what I want to teach you here and share with you. So actually this webinar, when I was approached by the global program to share my knowledge about webinars, at the beginning I thought, well, you know, I do have experience on academic teaching, but I also, and thankfully, because of the UK chapter, we have been experimenting quite a lot with online events. I think as most of you lately, you have been either organizing or attending a lot of online events in the format of webinar. And that actually helped me to learn how we can create a really nice, interesting webinar. It doesn't matter the type, it doesn't matter the topic, that it is always going to be very interesting. So that is like my goal, my purpose for this webinar, to share with you some knowledge and to give you actually an overview, just not only in the case that you are thinking on organizing an online event for women in localization, but something that you can apply in your life at very different levels. Because actually, especially nowadays, we are involved in so many online events, either because we volunteer in women in localization, but also maybe in our companies, we are asked to deliver a webinar, or maybe we're just interested in doing something for our own brand and personal brand. So my goal here is to actually share with you some tips and advices that you can use no matter which type of webinar or online event you're thinking, and you can apply all of that. So very quickly, I've just divided the presentation in different sections. So also what I'm going to do is after each section, because I cannot see you, and I think that's a really bad, really very bad thing about sometimes making a presentation like this, where I have to share my screen, is actually I lost touch with people, so I cannot see you, but I want to hear you. So so every after at the end of each section, I will pause to actually give you time if you want to unmute yourself or make a question, but also to give you a little bit of time to think about what we have been seeing in that section and to apply it. Because in the end, all of this, it's as a big exercise, a big practice, let's say, that I would like you to apply to an idea that maybe you already have for a webinar, and use the different topics that we're going to be covering to model that idea of a webinar. And at the very end, while we will have some time for questions, I would like you to share with me and with us what is the webinar, the idea for a webinar that you have came with as a result of the different things that we have seen. So without further ado, I'm going to start with the first thing that we need to have very, very clear when we are thinking about organizing or participating or delivering a webinar, which is why. Why do we want to do it? What is the purpose? We could say that thinking about the purpose of the webinar is the first step to thinking about the soul of the webinar. Sometimes probably you have been in webinars, in online events that were maybe just a presentation with a lot of facts, with a lot of data, a lot of information that, yes, were informative, but they didn't have any soul. They at some point, sometimes we even feel that we could have just, read that somewhere, that, or maybe we can just record it and watch it later, because just the experience of being there online with a person talking directly to us, it wasn't interesting enough just because of that, because it was just a lot of facts and a lot of soulless information. And we want to avoid that in any webinar. It doesn't matter the topic. We always want to have we want our presentation and our webinar to be successful, but also memorable. And if you have read a little bit about a technique called storytelling, you already know that storytelling, or trying to craft our purpose, our idea into a story that has a beginning and then has a middle with something interesting is going to happen, and then it has an end, is one of the best ways to keep an audience engaged. And it doesn't matter, again, if our webinar is going to be very technical and very data focused. If we are able to think about what we want to talk about and create a story about it, it will make the people to be completely engaged, because when they are in the middle of it, they will want to know the end, because there will be an end that is gonna make the whole story to be more interesting. So first, to take into account, and I would like you to think about it, is if you already have an idea in your mind, catch that idea that is now around, catch that idea and think about why actually you would like to have a webinar about that idea. And for that, here you have a very interesting and very useful graphic that probably is going to help you quite a lot to grab a little bit more that idea and to understand a little bit more why you want to share that idea. So we can say that when we want to share a message, it could be for one or two or three or the four of these reasons. And it's because we want to inform, or we want to entertain, or we want to persuade, or we want to inspire. Sometimes what it happens when we are very passionate about an idea and webinar is that we just lose a little bit of focus on actually the purpose of the presentation. And either we try to do everything, or we focus just on one thing, and that presentation, that webinar becomes very, very heavy and not very well balanced. So one very nice trick that you can do is use this chart, or just remember the four main purposes and to pick two. So once you have your idea, try to think about what of these four purposes, what are the two most important ones for you. And once you have that, it's very important to have it very, very big in anything else that you're working with, to have it very, very big, so that when you are preparing the presentation or reviewing a presentation that has been prepared by the speaker, if you're not the speaker, you have to review that presentation and try to find in that presentation the links to these two motivations. So if we have thought about a presentation that is going to be mostly inspirational and entertaining, we have to be able to find in that presentation the links that are inspiring and that they are entertaining. And if actually we see that those connections are very weak, it's going to allow us to improve our presentation and to make some suggestions to the presentation, so that these two main purposes are met. And it is very, very effective to do this. It is very effective to actually make sure that we keep the audience engaged, that the audience, it is feeling the purpose that we actually wanted and we intended for that presentation. So we have the idea, and I would like you to think in already, if you haven't done it, what are the two main purposes of your idea, of your crazy idea that has been always on your mind and you didn't know very well how to craft it, and just choose two of those. Once you have it, we have a soul, but we need the body of the soul. We need something to wrap this idea that still we know why, we know what we want to accomplish, but actually the next step is to try to come up with a topic that is going to be the body for our presentation. And probably you already have been in the situation in which you have an idea, this idea that we're talking, the crazy one that you love, but you're not sure if that idea is going to be very interesting for other people. You're not sure if actually it is a good idea. So how can we try to have a better understanding on if the idea that we have in our minds, it's going to work or not? There are four very interesting, very good strategies that you can follow to try to understand better if the topic, it is a winner topic, let's say. It's a topic that is going to attract the kind of people that you want to attract. And I'm going to share with you these four ways. First one, you probably already have thought about it. It is, of course, we have to know, or we have to think about who our target audience is. We have, when we come up with an idea, it's always something that we believe is very interesting. We believe everybody's going to love. But now that we have that first understanding, we need to separate ourselves from our idea, and we actually have to look at it from the eyes of the others, from the eyes of the people that we actually want to attend, to see if they agree with us. So it is very recommended to think about the attributes of your participant, of your perfect webinar participant. And here is also very important to first have a clear idea on the kind of webinar that we want to do in terms of the situation. Again, is this a webinar that is going to be done, for example, as part of Women in Localization, or is a webinar that is going to be done as part of an association, so it is aimed to volunteers? Is this the webinar that it is something that you would do in your organization, in your company, and is targeted to existing clients or new clients? Or maybe it is actually within your company targeted to partners, or actually could be to your own colleagues. It could be actually a webinar that your manager has asked you to prepare, either to share some insight with your colleagues, or actually that you would like to do to precisely share your knowledge with other colleagues and to share some of the things that you would like to express in the world. And actually, sometimes it's a very good idea. I found personally that proposing a webinar, proposing an online event in your company to your colleagues or clients, it is a really good way to establish yourself as a subject matter expert and to help to progress in your career path, because it makes you much more visible, even though many of us actually do not feel very comfortable at talking and being very present. But it is actually organizing a webinar in your companies. It's actually a very, very good way to be more visible to other colleagues, to other managers, for example, and to the whole organization in general. So if this is something you have never done in your company, you've never dared to do, you have seen other people proposing but you have never dared to you, this is actually a very, very good idea to propose as a part of maybe your career path or your career progression in your company. So anyway, we have mentioned target audience could be colleagues, could be partners, could be volunteers if we are in association. Calls also could be educational. Maybe we have it asked to do or deliver a course or a talk to students that they want to know more about our niche. All of that, all of them are completely different. They have different ages, they have different interests, they have different ways of seeing life, and having and being able to picture them and being able to picture their characteristics is going to allow us again to see our idea from their point of view, from their eyes, and to see and to craft it in a way that is going to be much more wholesome. So we have the audience. I hope you also have it. I hope you are writing down what is your target audience from all the different possibilities. And once we have that, it's going to be easier then to think a little bit more about our audience and think about what are their pain points and what are the opportunities for these participants. So when we talk about pain points, are we talking about what is everybody complaining about? What is everybody saying that they would like to know more? What is everybody saying that is going to change and nobody knows how it's going to change? What is everybody saying that they would like to have more feedback, more personal experience about it? Those are examples of pain points that you probably already have seen, but you have never been able to actually write down as an opportunity for a webinar. Then you also have the opportunities. And the opportunities, it's also very similar, but also these opportunities could come from your own experience, in which you believe that certain people could benefit from learning new skills or to accessing some information that you have, or by being inspired by some of your experiences. So in terms of opportunities, sometimes actually we are the ones that we have detected that there is an opportunity and we want to share it with different people. So one very interesting thing about having a list or creating a list of pain points and opportunities for the participants is that once you have a clear idea of their needs, their pain points, and their opportunities, that is going to help you to come back again to your idea, your initial crazy idea that is there, and try to see if that crazy idea addresses any of the pain points or opportunities that you have seen. And that's the perfect connection between what you have in your heart, in your mind, and what is there, the reality. And that is the magical moment to find the winner topic, when you actually can make the link between a pain point or opportunity and an idea that you already had that would address that. So this sometimes is a lot of, could be like a brainstorming. It, especially if we are really not sure how to link both things, it helps a lot to talk to other people and to just mention these different ideas and think in actually seeing how these people react to our ideas. If they mention that they actually would love to have a webinar about that, if they don't seem to be very interested. So this kind of a benchmarking, informal benchmarking also can help us a lot if we are having trouble connecting our thoughts, our ideas with what we see that people say that they would like to know more. So that that's the magical moment that sometimes can be a little bit difficult and take a little bit of time. But that is the one that is going to allow you to progress and to go and continue organizing and thinking about the rest of the details. Another thing that it helps quite a lot is that once you have the idea, the generic idea, that you know it addresses a point or it gives an opportunity. And it's also very important to try to come with a angle that is a little bit more niche. So even if the idea in general or the topic in general is very, very interesting, chances are, especially nowadays, that we have webinars everywhere, chances are that there are other organizations, other people that they have covered the same topic because it's a topic that it is an interesting one. So what we can do here is that we don't need to abandon that topic to go to something completely different. What we can do is that find an angle to that topic, a niche within that topic that hasn't been explored yet. And yes, that means that it's going to mean that less people might go to the webinar. But again, if our idea is to go for something very specific, very new, very innovative, making or choosing an angle in a topic and make it a little bit more different or a little bit different from other webinars that have more or less the same title is always a good idea. Again, I think nowadays we are very, we have so many webinars. There are many articles that they say that we are overexposed to online events and online things. So people are starting to be more and more selective. And that means that probably in the first months when we all were quite bored, we have been going to all kind of events. Right now, we are selecting those events much more. And since we already have been in very generic events or events that are more generic, now it takes a little bit more to get us interested in something. And that is when we see that, again, it is a webinar that explores a niche, explores an angle that we haven't seen that much. Finally, the fourth, also very important, is that we also have to think on what are the benefits, the core benefits of our webinar. We have to think at least into 3 or 4 compelling benefits for the target audience. Because otherwise, what we sometimes some people feel after webinars that they have heard a lot of information and that's it. It's not something that they can action on immediately, or they actually don't see very clearly how they can use that information for their own benefit. And therefore, they, whenever, in some cases, when they see a new webinar, when that webinar is marketed, if it's not clearly stated what are the main takeaways, what are the things that they are going to be able to action after the webinar, many people might, again, not be so interested because they don't see the real connection or the direct connection between going to a webinar and them having a takeaway that they will be able to action. So as you probably saw, we did this in this webinar. We listed the 3 main takeaways, and that is something that it is very important to think about it at the very beginning, so that first you can mention it every single time that you market or mention your event, but also to keep you on your toes. Again, when you have prepared the presentation or when you are reviewing a presentation, it's very important to take a look at it and really try to make sure that you are answering those questions, that the takeaways that you promised are there. So that is the 4th step that is going to help us a lot to make sure that after the webinar, the people that have attended to it, they are already applying it and they are remembering, and they will remember it, how the data and information shared in the webinar allow them to do something new that before they couldn't. So I'm going to pause here, just again to give you a little bit of time to think and to let this information sink and to write down, if you haven't done it yet, what is your idea, what is your purpose, what is the audience that you think they will be interested, what could be the angle, the niche of your topic, and what would be the core benefits of your webinar. So I'm going to stop here, and if any of you has any questions, so that I'm not also speaking all the time for 1 hour and something, if you have any questions, feel free to unmute yourself and make a question, so we can do a very small break before we continue. So any questions or comments? Okay, so I'm going to take that as it's a no. Remember that we also have some time at the end, and at that moment I will finish the presentation, so I will be able to see you, and we also will discuss all of these topics, so that you can actually share with me and with each other what are the ideas of webinars that you have been crafting following these tips. So we have the idea, we have the soul, we have the body. Now we have to think about what is the best format for the webinar. If you remember at the very beginning, I mentioned that we wanted this presentation to be as global as possible, because we want to help you. One of the goals of Women in Localization is to help you to advance in your career. And webinars can be used in many different formats and in many different situations. So, because before we mentioned that webinars could be used in many different situations, we just wanted to remember or remind you what are all the different types of webinars that you could be involved in, that you could organize or be part of or actually deliver. So some of them you already know because they are very well known. So for example, we do know professional training is a type of webinar. We do know association membership content, like this one. It's a type of webinar that is quite well known. Panel discussions, for example, are also very, very common. And for example, in Women in Localization, we have been using quite a lot this format for online events, because they work quite well. Quick tip: one of the things we have seen again in Women in Localization UK is that when we are doing online events, the panelist discussion is working much better than the keynote of the one person, let's say, speech. We have seen that, again, being in an online event is much more consuming. Everybody feels quite tired after 2-3 hours at the most. So trying to organize something longer than that, it is not working. At some point, it just feels too heavy. And secondly, having just one keynote speaker speaking for more than 1 hour, 45 minutes, without any breaks in between, again, makes it very heavy. Makes it very, very heavy. So we have, and we understand that there are some topics where we need to have one person sharing his immense knowledge for a certain of time. We just have discovered that for the online events that we have been organizing, having not just one person, but 2 or 3, 4 people doing a panel makes it much more dynamic, and people feel a little bit more engaged, and it's easier to follow up with it. Also, even in a panelist discussion, trying to make it as interactive as possible works very well. So again, making questions, but not only just questions that are already prepared, but using other methods like the chat of the platform, or for example, there are platforms like Slido that allow the organizer to compile questions and even create polls, live polls. So we have used a Slido in our events, and I've actually seen quite a lot the use of the Slido or interactive tools in the last events that I've been going lately, and it actually helps a lot because we having our audience engage in the sense that they are not just listening in a very passive way, but they are also making questions. They're also voting for all the questions. They are interacting with the chat, and they are it being able to talk more, again, especially if they are given some time to unmute themselves and speak, either in between the panel or at the end, or just trying to find a rhythm that allows people to participate as much as possible, and trying to reduce the passive, let's say, moments to experts say that not more than 45 minutes. So that is the maximum of the time that we can be just listening without actively participating.
Jennifer, a quick question, if I can. Would you suggest having, like, instead of that, having an assistant who helps you out with the comments and reads the comments and so forth?
Yes, definitely. In the panelist discussion, actually, because there is already we actually recommend to have a coordinator, a person that is going to be in charge of asking questions and replying questions. Definitely, we have actually found that having one or even more, because sometimes if we are using different channels, if we have a Slido and we have a chat, for example, maybe two people would be able to compile all that information much better. But yes, definitely having one person that is able to give way to questions, to compile them, sometimes even to encourage people to participate, it helps quite a lot. So then very quickly, but just because there are other types of webinars that are not so well known, and maybe you've never thought about it, and I wanted to give you this idea too. There are other webinars that are very interesting and that, again, can be a very nice stepping stone for your careers if you ever decide to try your luck with them. One of them is called the branding or reputation management. Again, if we do it inside our company, then this webinar is actually aimed to for us to be the spokesperson of our company and to establish our company as a brand that is an expert in a certain niche, etc. So that is something that, if we're interested, we could propose to our companies to organize a webinar about a topic in which our company is an expert, and ourselves, or invite another person, could speak and could actually show the knowledge of that company. That is getting more and more common these days. And it doesn't have to be the HR, the public relationship person. It doesn't have to be the BPO of the company. It could be us, for example, or at least we can organize it and then find the most suitable speaker in our company. That is perfectly fine. We also, there are other type of webinars, this is more internal for companies, but the corporate communications, when there are town halls or all hands or team events, probably you have seen many of them. It takes a great deal of preparation, and it takes actually a person that takes the time to create the calendar, to send it to everybody, to make sure that the presentations are correct, that nothing is lost. So that is another really interesting opportunity for us to volunteer to participate or coordinate one of the webinars. There is also the lead generation, which is very salesy, or it was considered to be quite salesy until I would say recently, where instead of just having a sales webinar, it's again more about marketing and branding, and it's more about generating interest about our company. Or if we are doing this for ourselves, for our own personal branding, generating information about ourselves, what we do, what we are experts on. And finally, there are also webinars that are aimed to customer retention and nurturing. When we have customers and we want to show them that we can give them added value information, that we can give them training, that we can actually share information with them in a nice interactive way, that's also a very good idea to organize a webinar aimed to the customers of our company and do it in a way that is interactive, and they will allow them to learn things that they always wanted to learn. So as you see, a lot of very different types of webinars. In within your company, outside of company, as a member of association for your own branding, personal brand. We can use webinars in many, many different ways. And I wanted just to share this again, because now that you have a better idea on the aim and the purpose of your webinar, it's also a really good idea to try to see in which of these categories your idea would be inserted. Do you have, is anybody has an idea that you think it wouldn't be in any of these, for example? Is there a different type of webinar that maybe you think that it's a different type, it's new, and maybe it's not here in this list? I'm curious to know, because there are so many, but probably there are more in these ones. Have you ever seen a different type of webinar that you found particularly interesting?
What about like an interactive one where, you know, the audience, you know, it's totally interactive. There's one topic, but it's really about, you know, maybe you had one or two sessions before about, you know, how to learn certain things, and then the last one is an interactive one.
And the interaction, what do attendees do in the interaction?
I don't know, like scrimmaging, for example, you know, testing, basically applying what they've learned before, you know, in previous sessions. I'm actually going to run one like that right now, and I've done it a couple of times before, but I still feel like it's not interactive enough, you know. So it's like you can have breakout sessions, or you can have the whole group participate, but essentially it's like, yeah, just very interactive. So I'm not sure if that actually is like called a webinar still, but
well, it's a section, or it's a way of conducting the webinars. I think, and we'll see it a little bit later when we talk about, just after here, we'll talk about the platforms. I think the platforms that we use are gonna condition quite a lot how interactive our webinar can be, because there are a lot of different tools for web streaming, for webinars, for training, etc. And some of them are quite advanced. Some of them actually would allow us to, as you mentioned, for example, to separate people in different rooms. And in the case that we want to have work groups, and we want each group to work in something different, and then we want all of them to get together to present what they have done together, that kind of tools that would allow us to do something like that. So first, it's going to depend a lot on the tool, how much interactivity the tool allows. Another thing we have seen, for example, is that, and we saw it in Women in Localization, at the very beginning, the first online events, we encouraged everybody to have all the cameras on and all the mics on, because we wanted everybody to be able to talk and to just interact as if it was an in-person event. And it didn't work. It didn't work because first, with more than 20 or 30 people with the camera on, some platforms, many of them, they struggle, and they start having connection problems, and people start not being able to see the images very well. And the same with muting and unmuting. Per default, asking everybody to be muted is very is the opposite to being dynamic, because you want people to be able to talk anytime, as we normally do. We just raise our hand or we just speak, and that's how it should be. However, when we are more than 15 people and we are all unmuted, and of course we cannot control our environments, we get a lot of mixed noises, we get a lot of issues related to the noise, and in the end it's not effective. So that's why we were mentioning that it is very important to take into account that it is a very, very different dynamic in comparison with the webinars where you have people. And sometimes it's a good idea to put a couple of rules, for example, regarding when people can participate, and have it done in a specific time slot, and whether to use cameras or not, so that even though it's a little bit less spontaneous, it's going to work better. But yes, trying to find as many different approaches and opportunities to let people participate. Yeah. Anything else? Anything new, different that is coming? I've seen like there's like explosion of very new, different types of webinars. I don't know if you have seen anything new that has been interesting for you lately.
Hi, Jen, this is Ceci.
Hi, Ceci.
We were at a webinar by Women in Localization last night with Yuka, and she shared a mural where she made everyone participate, and actually it was like a shared document, and everybody was putting post-its, and you could see the movement of everybody and their location. It was pretty neat and interactive. So that might be something that I think it was called Mural. If someone here joined last night, yes, because I was there late.
Yes,
but
I did. It's called Mural. It's mural.co. I took a look at it this morning, and it's very neat. Yes.
Yeah.
It was nice to see how everybody participated, all the stickers with the different colors, and it was very interactive. It was nice to see. So
that's great.
I don't know.
That's really good. I believe that the webinars and the platforms are going to continue evolving because of that, because they have realized that just having sound and video is not enough to do something more interactive. And there are more small tools like Mural, Slido that you can use to complement the webinar.
Exactly.
And I believe, and I think actually it's very, very interesting to continue keeping an eye on these new tools, because at some point, the more interactive that we do, and actually the new things, the newer the tools that we use, the more engaging it will be, because people will be surprised by something new that they've never tried, and they will be more engaged. So completely recommend to just keep an eye on these new tools, and also the evolution of the platforms. What I've seen a lot is that the platforms like Meet and Zoom, they are also evolving to allow new features. So definitely. So talking about platforms, I'm not going to extend myself here a lot because you have all the information in internet. I just wanted to talk out about how to choose basically the best platform, taking into account different features that we would like it to have. So as you know, for Women in Localization, we have Meet, which has been evolving quite a lot. I've seen a couple of articles. They are actually competing quite a lot with Zoom. They want to become the new Zoom, and they are working quite hard to introduce new features. So that is great for us. But if you want to organize your webinar in a different environment, for example, for your company, and you have access to different tools, or you have to use maybe that tool because it is the policy of your company, you might then, for example, be using BlueJeans or WebEx or Microsoft Teams, and you name it. These are maybe the biggest, but there are many, many more. And all of them are very different. So first thing is, ideally, of course, try to choose the platform that you are more familiarized with, because each of them, they have very different characteristics. But if you can choose, if actually you are in the position of choose, the things that we have to always take into account before we go for one platform or the other is, first, the number of attendants that they can allow, either in the free version, if we want to go for the free version, or in the paid version. And this is very important because, again, if we are planning to do very big meetings, very big webinars, or we want to have the opportunity to have as many people as we want, we will have restrictions depending on the platform. Also, how the recording or the streaming works. If they allow recording and allow streaming and allow also to be able to store those recordings, and how they work, if they have flexibility about that, or if it's, for example, limited. The muting and non-muting needs, as we mentioned, different platforms, for example, allow the organizers to have quite a good control and, for example, mute and unmute everybody or specific people, while others are a little bit more basic in that sense. They're not so flexible. So, for example, Meet, which is amazing, is really good. But Meet, for example, as far as I've seen, doesn't have, for example, automatic muting and unmuting. So, which means that, of course, you have to ask everybody to do it themselves, and the organizer doesn't have a lot of control. Again, especially if we are in a very big webinar with 100 people. With 100 people, chances are that some people will be muted and unmuted, and the organizer will actually not have much control over that. So that's something very interesting to just take a look, because depending on the platforms, they have more advanced controls about that or not. Pricing, of course, if we want to do it in a free platform, or we want to invest on that, especially if we are thinking on doing more than one webinar and we want to actually use it for a long term. Calendar integration, actually, this is very important. Everybody, or nowadays, everybody needs to have things in a calendar. And so it's also very important that whatever we choose, it will allow us to send calendar invites to the different attendees so that they can always have it synchronized with their accounts. And it allows us to always have a clear idea on the time zone, for example. So automatic adjustment of the time zone, this is very important. So they always sit in the right time zone, and that they can synchronize it with any type of device that they use, any calendar that they use. So all of that is very basically very in a summary. The main things that we have to take into account that then when we do the webinar are gonna become quite important. I don't know if you want to share actually any other platform that you would like to recommend, that you have seen that is working good, that you would like to use or that you have used that is interesting in this space. I've seen lots of them, but I would say these are the best at the moment. Although Zoom has had and continues having a couple of problems, of privacy problems lately.
I think I can share a link with a tool which allows you to do real networking. So you have your own like icon with the camera, so it's live, and you can move your your icon through the space and join different locations. And when you're close to someone, you hear this person. If you're far from it, you don't hear it. So that's really funny. So I'll share a link just for networking in real life. Yeah,
that's amazing.
Please, that sounds great.
Sounds so good.
I'll try to find it right now. Yeah.
Thank you.
Very good. Very good. By the way, you already know, but actually I forgot to mention that we do have a playbook in Women in Localization about online events and webinars. So of course, I think I haven't put a link to it, but you have a lot of information, very useful information there, and it's a live document. So I think it could be interesting and useful if all these suggestions that you have about different tools that we can use, different platforms, we can also add it to the playbook, and we can just have that as a reference material for ourselves. So going on to the preparation of how actually we prepare for a webinar. Again, it doesn't matter if we are gonna speak in the webinar or we're just coordinating the webinar. The role of the coordinator of a webinar is actually very, very important too, because in some cases we might find that we have an amazing speaker that is very knowledgeable, but maybe it doesn't have a lot of experience at speaking in public or experience in webinars, online webinars. So as an organizer, facilitator, we can help to guide the speaker to help them have an idea on the kind of things they should take into account, the kind of things they should prepare to make sure that the webinar that we are coordinating, it's going to be a success. So in both cases, it doesn't matter where we will be delivering ourselves or we are coordinating it. There are several steps that it's always very, very important to take into account. Some of them you probably already know. Actually, I would say most of them are common sense, but I find that it's very, very useful actually to have them like in the 10 things I have to remember, just to make sure, or as a checklist, to make sure that we haven't forgotten any of them. So rehearsal, for example, we know that it's very, very important. Again, especially if we are the person speaking, to make sure that the times that we have decided are working perfectly well, to see how we deliver the message. I want to share with you, I read a very, very good advice on how to rehearse the presentation, especially aimed to people that tend to be a little bit, they feel a little bit nervous about it, and they feel nervous about delivering a presentation. So rehearsing in general helps, of course. The more we rehearse, the more safe we feel. But this tip that I read in an article, I thought it was genius. It's a very tough one, I have to say, but it's genius, was recommending that we rehearse with another person. So we don't just rehearse on our own where everything is perfect, but we rehearse with another person, a friend, a colleague. And we ask that person to make it difficult for us. We ask that person to maybe interrupt us, to behave as if they were bored, to actually try to cover the different things that we can actually find in an online event, in a live event, so that it's going to be horrible. I actually have to say I did it. It's horrible. You suffer quite a lot, but doing a rehearse in such difficult conditions and being able to overcome whatever comes to you makes you be very, very well prepared for the real thing, and to be able to reply and to react to the multiple things that can go wrong, or that just we cannot expect, like they cannot hear us, the presentation doesn't work, people look very bored, all the different things that I would say that in an online event happen even more, because we have a lot of technical things that go wrong. So a quick thing about rehearsing: if you feel brave enough, if you think that you can take it, do it that way. Try to rehearse with one person that make it difficult for you, because then you will be prepared for everything. Another couple of things that are also very, very interesting is to always have very clear information about how you will deal with questions. What we mentioned here, about the house rules regarding when they can participate, why, of course, is that, and to have, so that everybody, when they arrive, they have a clear idea of the structure and the format, and it makes things easier, more smoother. Then, of course, the rest of the things I'm not going to stop, because this is actually just for you to have it like in your post-it wall, to have it as a checklist, and to mention and to make sure that you have everything. The other thing I would just mention is that to test the platform, the connection, and the settings in advance, what they call like a dress rehearse. It's also very important, because there is always something that might not get as expected. People cannot hear us correctly. The connection is not working as expected. There are many, many things that can go wrong in an online webinar. So again, trying to test that, and not just 15 minutes early, but the platform test with the speaker, if you're not the speaker, should be done ideally a couple of days before, just in case there is a problem that actually you need a little bit more time to fix. Otherwise, it might be too late if you do it just the day before. It's a little bit risky. So I'm not going to go into here, because I actually just wanted to share this with you. You will have this presentation, so you will use this you will be able to use it. It's just more like a reminder, and also because I actually wanted to finish with a couple of practices that are maybe not so well known, not so much common sense, and because they are not a little bit more innovative, maybe you haven't thought about them, and that I thought it was a good idea to actually share with you and see what you think about them. So apart from the normal ways of the basic channels that we know, social media, email, website, blog, press release, advertising, which is what we are doing already with Women in Localization. There are 6 things that I've started to see in different events that are a little bit new and different, and that I think actually are quite effective. So one of them is actually mention the event in the signature lines. Are in your, for example, signature lines, in the rest of the team that is organizing the event, and also, and this is related to the second one, even the speaker, to ask the speaker to share that they will be doing a webinar with us to their own audiences. So the speaker auto promotion, which is something I never thought about it, about actually asking the speaker, if we are not the speaker, to share that with their social media followers, but also to post basically, and to mention that they're going to be doing something with us. It's actually very interesting. Then we also have another very good source, which is also is called a co-promotion, especially in women in localization, because we are linked and we have really good relationships with other organizations, other localization organizations. I've seen that we already are doing that quite a lot. I've seen that we do promote and we mention events organized by associations. I've seen, for example, with Translators Without Borders and Gala and things like that. So we do that promotion, but the other way around, try to find other groups. And in this case, I'm not just talking about a whole association, but I'm talking about Facebook groups or LinkedIn groups that also go about localization, and to ask them if they would like to share that information in their own channels. So especially, I think we're quite lucky in the localization space because there are many associations, many groups, and there is a lot of, I would say, collaboration among each other. So that's something that it can be a very, very good to do, just to make sure that we are reaching other people. If we want to, especially what we want is to try to have new people that have we have never seen before. That is a way of reaching a group of people that maybe are not directly connected with us, but they're connected to other groups. So I actually, when I saw that, I actually did a list. I went in LinkedIn and Facebook, and I started taking a look to groups related to localization, just using the keywords. And I found a lot of groups I had no idea they existed. And I thought, well, we're just trying to share knowledge, trying to share information. These groups and the people that are in those groups, they actually might be very interested in knowing other events. So that is something that I believe is not, it's done up to a certain extent, but if we actually make time and we do a little bit of research in social media about these groups and pages, and we make a list out of them, I think we could expand the channels in which we can mention our webinars immensely. Then we have what is called the internet experts, or the real influencers. We all know several experts in the localization sector that have a lot of followers, that are always sharing information, and that everybody knows. These are the real influencers because they are real experts, and these are the contacts that actually we could ask them to mention maybe a webinar if they find it interesting, to actually mention to all connections in social media. That would give us a lot of reach because they have a lot of followers and they are already considered subject matter experts. So them mentioning or recommending a webinar, it's actually a really good point for us. Then the articles in LinkedIn on guest blogs. We in Women in Localization, we have the blogs, our own blog, where we are writing information. But it's true that in other cases, what I've seen is that other organizations or people actually, what they do is that they create an article that is like a little bit of a sneak peek. Create an article about something related to the webinar that they're gonna deliver, to actually start the conversation, to have people reading that conversation, and then they mention that they're gonna deliver a webinar on the same topic. So this content creation in the form of articles, again, in LinkedIn, as an article in LinkedIn, or in blogs about localization. It's also something that I haven't seen a lot, but when I've seen it, I actually thought it was a great idea to start creating a little bit of content to actually generate the interest before the webinar is even advertised sometimes. And the last thing I've seen is the sneak peeks, but in the form of video. So actually, I've seen a couple, especially with Facebook Live, I've seen a couple of organizations that what they do is they ask the speaker or the different speakers to record a small video just presenting what they're going to talk about in the webinar, like inviting people to the webinar. So maybe just like a 2-minute video presenting that, or if you want to do it a little bit more elaborate, it could be just a 2-minute discussion about the topic. So it could be the speaker and maybe one of the organizers, more like a panel, where they will, for 2 minutes, they will start the conversation about the topic. And that is something that is very effective because it's very, again, it's very visual. We can see it in Facebook, for example. It's 2 minutes, but it's the way also for people to have that advanced access to see if they like the speaker, if they're interested about what they're saying, and to make up their minds, having a little bit of a taste of what the webinar is going to be like. And that is something, as I said, quite new. I haven't seen it much. I personally want to do it. So for the ladies in Women in Localization UK that are there, that they always put up with my crazy ideas, I would love to do this for our next event, to try to do a little bit of a sneak peek, a little bit of video, just to give a taste of the next topic that we're going to cover. So that's it. That is all that I have to offer in terms of tips and things I have been learning and things that I've seen that work better or not so well. A compilation of failures sometimes and successes. And as I mentioned, the main thing that I would like for you all to be able to take away from this is actually to have a clear idea on what would be the next webinar you would like to be involved in, either because you would like to organize it or collaborate with them, or actually to talk in a webinar. So we have a little bit of time. Yes, we are quite a bit in time. So I think now I can just stop the presentation so you can see me. Oh, I just want to share this. This is just a screenshot of our last event at Women in Localization. And this one actually was a pub quiz. We decided to change the format to do something completely informal as a different way of doing an online event. But as I mentioned, if it's okay with you, I think we can use the rest of the time to now see each other, or me being able to see each other and see you. You can unmute yourself and make any questions that you would like to make, but also just to, if you want a little bit of time to finish thinking about what would your ideal webinar, which webinar you would like to organize or you would like to be a speaker of, and just share with us how you envision that webinar. Is that okay? Very good. Can you see me now?
Yeah, we can see you, Jennifer.
Hi, Inge.
Hi. Thank you so much. I have a million ideas based on your what you were saying, and lots of ideas and suggestions. And I started out with a very narrow view of webinars, and it would be great to make something that is interactive, that is fun, a bit different. And thank you for the inspiration. I won't share all my crazy ideas with you, but they're here in my book. Thank you so much.
Share one, Inger. Tell us the first.
How to avoid murdering your colleague. And the idea, okay, I'll spin on that one. And the idea behind that is that it's built a little bit about, personality makeups, extroverts dealing with introverts, and all the difficult people that we meet in working life.
Can I sign up to watch this?
Yeah, well, anyway, and I was thinking, it is something that, we've all met them. And, the backstabber, the difficult one who will down you in meetings every time they get half an opportunity. But I was thinking that, these are actually quite serious topics, but maybe it would be possible to make it a bit fun. Yeah, okay, and so that's me. Thank you.
That's great. Inger, which would be your audience? Do you think, do you see this something that it would be done like inside a company to promote people to be able to work better, or more as something for professionals, for example, just to be able to collaborate better with different, for example, in the case of freelance translators, to be able to collaborate better with the clients that they have or the companies that they work with?
I was more thinking about people who interact with each other on a frequent basis, teams, project teams. And we have that challenge in our industry, that most of the talent we have naturally come from introverts, like translators and software engineers. And so it's something that, well, I don't know. I'm waffling because I don't know. That's as far as I got. Project teams.
I like it. I think you already have the title. Like, the title is perfect.
Thank you.
Any other ideas? Tell me. I want to know other ideas about the webinar you would love to organize, coordinate, or deliver yourself.
I think something maybe on video localization or audiovisual and how that's handled maybe in motion picture or for companies like Netflix maybe. I mean, I've seen there's been a few things online about it, but not that many. So it'd be great to learn more about that. Though that's more me looking to learn more specifically about how they work and how they manage the process. Yeah,
that's really good. It's true that video games localization, which actually used to be the thing that I taught at the university. It is actually, they are saying that because of the pandemic, the video games industry is booming like ever. It has always been quite good in comparison with sometimes audiovisual, but now it's even more. And some people are predicting a Netflix-like explosion in video games localization in terms of platforms that work like Netflix, but for video games. And if that happens, and then everybody's going to be able to play any kind of video game in a streaming base, they are saying that then probably that industry is going to have like a Netflix-like explosion. So it could be actually a good moment to talk about that. I'm going to throw you a ball, Elizabeth. So video games localization, do you think is generic enough? Is too generic, or would you like to try to put an angle to it that would make it not so similar to other similar webinars?
I think probably what you just described about how this pandemic has caused an explosion for video games to become, of course, more popular, and how they're dealing with it. Like, are these video game companies getting more budget in now because of increased sales? Does this mean they don't need to rush games anymore? Can localization be considered as an initial thought, rather than the afterthought? This sort of thing. Like, how are things really changing right now? So I guess the next step would be finding someone who's in a localization role in one of these companies and asking them, right, what's happening with you right now? How are you reacting to this sudden influx of use? Like, how is their customer support working as well? I'm guessing there might be more activity there too.
Yeah, that sounds great. So precisely, that could be a really good example of framing a topic to make it even more relevant. So we could actually, the title could be something like video games localization in the pandemic or related to coronavirus, so that you make it even more relevant rather than in the title just mentioning video games localization in general. So that's actually a really good example of how we have a very good topic, which is video games localization, and then we just try to find the angle that is going to make it even more relevant or more interesting, because again, there are some webinars about video games localization, but it's true that I haven't seen one specific about how the COVID is affecting and is going to affect the industry, because it's so soon, it's so new that nobody has actually yet organized a webinar about that. So it's great, because that would be even more interesting.
Okay, hi, Jennifer. I don't have a title for a webinar yet, but I have a question for you. Do you suggest having a survey sent to the attendees after the webinar? Because I found I attended a lot of webinars during this pandemic, and I don't think none of them sent me a survey to know how they did, how they can improve, what they did good, what they could, you know. Do you recommend to send a survey, or that's just extra work for the attendee and they wouldn't come to your next webinar?
That's a really good question. And actually, a little bit divided with the survey part. I think it's always a good idea to have the feedback, and having a survey just after the event is probably one of the best ways to actually know how successful it was. What I found is that I think actually the reason why people are not sending surveys anymore, or is not so common, is because not so many people reply to them. At some point, what we see is that the majority of people do not reply to the surveys. So I'm divided, because I don't know if it's maybe because of the format, because they need to be a little bit more dynamic or quite short, so people can really fill them in 1 or 2 minutes. And if it's more than that, they don't get discouraged. I do think it's very interesting. I would try.
Maybe the questions are too long. Like if you just
maybe
ask them to, you know, just click.
Yes.
Instead of just explaining what they liked best, just giving them options.
Yes.
And then just, you know, click the option, and they don't have to type. So it takes them like 2 minutes to actually complete a survey.
Exactly, I would go for that more than the old way. I think it is that was maybe the reason why we didn't have that many responses. But definitely, because otherwise it's quite difficult to know
what you've done right. Yeah.
No, because with a normal event, you actually can gather that in the networking part. You actually, after the event, you mingle, and you can see, you can feel how people are, and people actually tell you. It is true with webinars, a little bit more when we don't have that feedback, immediate feedback so much. Elizabeth, I think you wanted to say something. Sorry.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, with feedback, would some of these tools that were mentioned earlier, like mural.co, would that something like that be another approach at getting feedback, maybe?
Yes. Yes.
I haven't. I just took a look at. I took a look at it this morning, so I don't know if it works for a survey or not. But it's definitely worth taking a look at it and see if it's more interactive and more appealing to the audience. Definitely.
Yeah, exactly. I just remember something I saw actually to try to get that feedback in a very immediate way, because the other thing that I've seen is that if we send the survey, it has to be sent as quickly as possible, as like right after the event. The more we wait, I would say even if we wait more than 2 days, it's too late. People are not going to reply. So what I've seen in other events is actually people using Slido to just, when they are finishing the event, so the event is not even finished, but on the closing remarks of the event, they actually ask people, they put like a poll in Slido, and they ask people to vote to get the feedback from the people about the event just at the very end of the event, when people are still online. And I thought that was a great idea to try to have as many people as possible. So when just before you end the event, that people is still online and you ask them to take 1 or 2 minutes to do it, I think that could be quite effective too.
Good. I'll take a look at it and see if it works. Thank you.
So Jennifer, first, thank you so much. This was great. Second, I like your T-shirt. Women Left. I like that. Very appropriate, and for a number of reasons. Third, so this is maybe not a question specifically to you, but maybe to the chapters team and so forth, because I know that some chapters are very active right now and they're doing events like the UK chapter, Italian chapter, also because of a necessity, because they could not have a live event, and sub chapters are not doing anything. And I know, like, I'm just wondering, what else we can do to encourage teams to chapters to do this, because it's actually like, with this sort of training, I think it's super useful. Can we give them the topics? Can we give them the outline? Can we, I think it's really useful that these chapters continue to exist and in this virtual space, right? So I guess just, kind of a questions, comment for everybody, not to Jennifer specifically.
Would it be okay, Jennifer, if I shared my thinking with Maria, with the other Maria? Yeah, it's a great point, Maria, and we have actually been doing that since the beginning of the pandemic in terms of working with the chapters. The geo managers are talking to them regularly, suggesting topics, formats, kind of giving them everything. There's actually, I think, possibly 2 or 3 chapters out of the 24 who haven't had an event yet, a virtual event yet. So it is the minority, and there are different reasons behind that. But we've recently released a virtual event playbook to support the chapters, some more guidelines in terms of Google Meet. Obviously, Jennifer's webinar or presentation on how to run an effective webinar was fantastically timed as well. So yes, that's certainly continues to be our focus, but we're very, very grateful to all of the chapters, and I know a lot of the chapter managers and chapter volunteers are in this call today for putting virtual events together in short period of time with I guess trying to juggle work and kids, family, whatever, pets. And also run the events. So yeah, it's there's always more that we can do, and yeah, the feedback is valuable, Maria.
Thank you so much, Maria.
Cheers.
I think if I can give the perspective of the UK chapter, and ladies that you're also here, you can also confirm. I think in our case, we became even more active than before. We end doing one event per month. We have stopped a little bit, but we became more active. But I think we had the right conditions. So on one hand, we have an amazing team that they actually had a lot of experience in online tools, and they already, for them, was quite easy to make the jump to online tools. So we have shown that she left, but we have Elizabeth and the rest of the team. For them, actually, it was easier, and it is easier to organize something online than a normal event in person. So we actually did more because it was easier, and we had so many ideas of things we wanted to do and things we wanted to experiment, like the pub quiz. Pub quiz in person would have been quite complicated to do. So we actually use it as a way of experimenting with formats that before we didn't think they would work. So I think it depends a lot of maybe the team, how are the team members, if they are used already to organizing online events for other reasons, personal situations. I think a lot of people has been impacted, and maybe teams are smaller. If some of the members are in a difficult situation and they have less time to spend, that also might be a case to take into account. But the UK team is quite big and quite tech savvy, I can say, and I think that has helped us a lot.
Cool.
Very good.
Jennifer, sorry,
Thank you, Jennifer.
One last thing. Sorry. I apologize because I had to drop for a call in the middle. Perhaps you covered these. Do you find that the content and how a speaker presents or prepares for a webinar or a live presentation, a live event, is it different from content point of view? And I think you will understand if I tell you what I'm thinking. I gave a live presentation in London last December on grit and overcoming the imposter syndrome. And I had a lot of fun and I learned so much. And I would love to kind of deliver it, so to say, or share it with a wider audience. So do you feel that the content, if it's a live presentation or a live kind of, I guess, setting versus an online, do you feel that the content needs to be adapted in any way, or do you have?
Yes, I think yes. I think one of the couple of things I mentioned, for example, is that we have seen in our events that to start with, have like a keynote speaker, like one person speaking. It doesn't work that well when it's online because it requires a lot of attention. It requires people to be very passive for 1 hour and 45 minutes. It doesn't work as well. So for example, if we want to do something inspirational, like what you did, it is more difficult. It is more difficult to engage audience for 1 hour when it's online. Also, for example, presentations, when we're sharing the screen and presentations, it's great to share information, it's great to people to see data, but then they cannot see you, which is something that doesn't happen in the live event. So first for the speaker is, and that's, I'm going to talk about me, for the speaker is a nightmare, not being able to see people, not be able to move. For example, I am much more comfortable if I can move, if I can look at people, I can assess, no, here I'm completely blind. Because I'm behind the presentation, and actually people cannot see the person either. So anything that is inspirational, that it really requires a lot of contact, you have to be a really good speaker. Like, you cannot go behind or hide behind a presentation, and you have to be very good in your posture and your delivery, much better than maybe in person, because people are just looking at your face for 1 hour.
Yeah. Exactly. Great. No, great advice. Appreciate that, Jennifer. And well done. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this.
I think we have maybe a minute. I don't know if you want to mention anything, share anything else. Just a topic. What could be a next topic for women in localization for the next global one? Have you came with an idea of something actually we could organize? We could ask the global program to organize. Did you meet?
I have something in line, but you should have received the email by now, right?
Yes.
It's not really working that great, but we're working on it.
Registration wasn't working great, but there are fun things we can do as a community as well.
Yes.
Putting our heads together and find something. Just spinning on something that about Maria's question and your recommendation, excuse me, Jennifer, and that is, why not pull in some actors or pretend actors into your webinar? Maria, you were talking about, you have people, you have doubts, you have two people fighting against each other, the one with confidence and the one without. So, maybe a bit of role play could liven things up a bit.
Interesting. I love your ideas. You're
yes, and that brings me up to something that the Silicon Valley chapter did a while back with Teresa Marshall, where she was presenting how to be a coach, and she then did sort of a live interactive session between her and, it was actually myself, but with these new tools and techniques, we can have a way to do that now, where it's not just one person speaking to everyone. We can have sort of an interactive session. So I think we have all these ways of inventive ways of making it more interactive. So that's really great. I really appreciate you guys sharing those tools. I had no idea this stuff was around, so that's really, really great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I agree, and I'm also, because I have to say that I'm the kind of person that likes always to experiment. So seeing that there are so many, I think that it's going to be the future, to try to create a new way of delivering webinars that are based on different tools that allows us to be much more interactive than just sharing a presentation, which I've done. But maybe in 1 year, I will do this webinar in a different way, much more dynamic. But it's true that right now we have some limitation, especially with the platforms that we are using. So unless we put in new tools and we just try, I think we should evolve maybe to a new way of doing the webinars in a more interactive way, using the tools that are appearing right now.
Yeah. All right. I hate to cut all of you guys off. It is 9:30. We scheduled the session to be an hour with flexibility for an additional half hour. I hope you got everything out of it that you really wanted to. The discussion was amazing. I'm really grateful for all of you guys' input. And thank you, Jennifer. Thank you so much. It was amazing. Tons of ideas. Inga, I'm floored by your title. I can't wait to hear your webinar. I will be the first participant because, we don't think about it, but that happens all the time. So without further ado, I'm going to close this webinar and have a great evening, great morning. It's great to see all of you guys. See you next month, where we've prepared the next one with Eva Klaudinova, who will be talking about program management.
Okay.
Thank you so much, guys.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Pia.
Bye.
Bye.